Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Worcester Township Board of Supervisors business meeting for August 21st, 2024. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. My name is Rick DeLello. I'm the chairman of the board. To my left is Lou Betts, who's our vice chair. To my right is Steve Quigley, who is our third member. On the side tables, we have Wendy McKenna, who is here as our solicitor, and John Everts, who is here as our township engineer. And on the back table is Jay Finnegan, our interim township manager, and Christian Jones, who's our assistant township manager. First and foremost, does anybody have any informational items for the board this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being video recorded for future broadcast. And the Board of Supervisors met in executive session on July 23rd at 3:30 p.m. for contract negotiations and personnel matters.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, first item up on our agenda is public comment. We do ask that you limit your public comment to 5 minutes. Does anybody have any public comment for the board? Bob?
Bob Andor, Worcester. I'm bringing this up now because your first activity, you'll be talking about paying the bills, and I don't specifically have any item or comment on that because I quite honestly can't figure it out. But it's relevant in the sense that back in July, I specifically asked about the costs or fees associated with the hydrant rental, because there was a large disparity in the package of information and a negative amount, which would typically not be applied to account where you were spending money. And the way I formulated that was, could somebody look into that so I didn't have to file a right to know? So a week later, the acting township manager responded to me with a one-line, two-line comment. You asked about this, and the result is a journal entry made by the accounting firm closing out 2023 revenue and expenditure. These types of adjustment are common and peculiar in fund accounting. I didn't know what that meant, so I looked it up, and there is no standard comment for what that is. In terms of common, seems to me it happens all the time. Peculiar is odd, which means it rarely happens. So it seems like a contradiction. It certainly didn't answer my question. I know that you guys were copied on that. I can't imagine that it answered your question. So I did have to file right to know. And then my right to know triggered, a whole host of things and questions, 50, 60 pages, probably more in terms of documentation. So I go through that documentation. But in addition to that, me asking the right to know, I think, then triggered the finance director to start to look into that. And then I get a follow-up response to that saying, relative to my request, when it was made, the finance director did not, this is relevant to the documentation from specifically the accounting firm. See, the accounting firm made a comment that's just standard, go away. When it was made, the finance director did not feel it was necessary, but followed the accounting firm's directive. The partner that handles the township account was on vacation until this week, August 14th. Anastasia Devlin, this is from your auditor, provided the finance director with the following via email. Good afternoon, Nicole. It appears that when you received the bill, you appropriately recorded it in the prior year. In the meantime, I also have proposed the accrual. To correct, remove my accrual entry in 2023, as well as reversal in 2024. Then we should be good. My right to know goes back 5 years. I didn't ask for 10. If I did, I suspect that it would say the same thing, that what Nicole has been doing for the last 5 years was what was done in the last year. So now the auditor is saying, just do the last year and you'll be good. I'm concerned. What are we doing? Are we doing it right? If we're not doing it right, who's in charge and what are they doing? So all of this is disturbing to me. I can't make heads or tails. I realize that accounting, depending on what it is, there's a picture in time. And so that picture may not necessarily line up with something else. But overall, at the end of a particular year, that all has to balance out. And the more I'm digging, the more the numbers don't seem to line up. It just gives me some serious concerns about what's going on. In particular, part of the right to know that I filed was give me all of the activities on this hydrant line item for 2024 as well as the previous 5 years. So in 2024, I got data up through July, certainly after I filed the right to know, up to that particular date. And there's nowhere in there that shows that negative amount. And when I look at the information from this particular period, it's now been corrected. So Nicole was, I guess, taken into account the correction that the auditor has now redone. I don't know what's right and what's wrong. I'm concerned. Are you guys concerned?
Thanks for your comments, Bob. We will certainly look into that. I can't answer you right here on that particular item.
I would be happy to go through and share with you. So the information that's provided to us is inconsistent. I mean, I've never really focused on it before, but what that picture is and where that picture is. So in January's meeting, the data that's provided to us is end of fiscal year, 12.
Right. Bob, I'm happy to take it offline. I'm happy to take the topic offline and sit down with you, sit down with the staff.
I'm happy to do that, Rick.
But I don't have the answer right here, right now, Bob.
I'm not expecting you to have the answer. I'm expecting you to show some concern that it doesn't make sense to me. I'm happy to go through it with you. I'm happy to go through it with any of the other supervisors because I'd like to get an answer on what that is. What I was going to say is the end of year, which is what's presented to us in January. I understand you wouldn't have anything up through the middle of January. So that's the end of the year. And then the first that we get to see it is February, which reflects January's numbers. What happens though, in December, in January, when we come to this meeting, you start to mix apples and oranges and popsicles. You change the budget number to reflect that, and then off of the new budget number, you start deducting the numbers from the previous year. It's very misleading. I'm happy to, again, to go through all of those. If I meet with you or any of the other supervisors offline and we get some resolution to this and there's some kind of understanding, that's fine. If not, I'll come again before here and I'll continue to express my concern about what's going on and who's doing what and who has the authority to do that. Seemed to me, if Nicole didn't agree with something from the auditor, she ought to push back to get some kind of resolution rather than just say, I didn't agree, but I did it anyways. That doesn't seem appropriate to me. This is one line item that happened to have a significant value that jumped out at me. But if that's what she's doing on all of these accruals across the board, either she's doing it right and your auditor's not doing it properly, or the auditor's doing it right and Nicole's not doing it properly.
Okay.
Bob, just to follow up to your question, we certainly know you, and you will be back. I know that, and I think that for the past year, we've been through a transition of people in the office and communicating with different people, and I apologize for that. But we try to get the best people in line. And to Jay's credit, I don't know how you come into a township, pick up all the information for the past number of years, and try to get the customer, you being the customer, the right answers that you're looking for. And I appreciate all the work Jay has done in the past few months in Elton Township with this hurdle. And I'm sure it's not easy, coming in and trying to trace back the work that was done before and why was it done, how was it done, working with the township treasurer, the accounting companies that work with the township. So just be patient with us. Once again, you have a question. I think we've all said we've been open and honest. It's something there that I have to turn to the professionals to come to some kind of resolution regarding the problem, and we will. We'll come to it. It's not something that we're taking money to pay for our car payments or our vacation home down in Avalon, New Jersey. Where's your home at, Rick? Sea Isle City. Rick, that's Rick's in Sea Isle City, doing something like that. So we will. Uh, we have a new person coming on board, and that'll probably be one of his first jobs, probably to research that, to work with you and come up and explain from our accounting company what happened. And if they did it the wrong way, they did it the wrong way. We have to try to correct the problem. So I certainly understand what you're saying. And I just don't like throwing people under the bus. And you're not throwing anybody to the bus, but you want an answer to a legitimate question you have. So we'll try to get that for you in the very short period of time coming forward.
Thank you.
Because I know you won't go away. And you shouldn't go away. If you have a question, it has to be answered. So once again, to the person who was here before, I think we appreciate people coming to the township meeting, having concern, raising a concern, looking at the books and looking over the back of the township supervisors. It may not seem like we appreciate it sometimes, but it's nice to be held accountable sometimes and have people being a watchdog for the township. So
Appreciate that. I'm not, when I ask a question, I'm just looking for the answer. If you don't have the answer, I'm not looking for lip service. And the answer that comes back ought to satisfy everybody's, the answer in my mind, when I ask the question, what is this charge? And the response back is, it's just an adjustment. An adjustment of what? If I got the answer, maybe I would have gone away. But now I'm going to look farther.
Okay, does anybody else have any public comment for the board this evening? Sir?
Hi, supervisors. My name's Steve Westhoff. My family and I have lived in the township for about a year now. It's been a beautiful place to live, great neighbors, and for reasons I'll mention, happy to have North Penn Water Authority public water, affordable and clean. I have an environmental background. I'm an attorney, and I studied environmental policy and law throughout school. I'm encouraged by some of the recent expression of interest and concern about environmental issues from you as supervisors and from members of the public. And one of the reasons I'm here tonight, the primary reason, is to support the appointment of an environmental engineer and consultant to look into the big topic property, the City View site, as it's called, but also others in the area. It's clear that that intersection has likely had a number of industrial uses, service stations on what seems like all four corners, automobile services, and according to some longtime residents, apparently a junkyard where they were just routinely burning tires and cars, and certainly that is all very concerning. And I guess one of my main points is certainly based on the data, based on the environmental regulations that are in place, any site where there's residual contamination that poses a threat to environmental health, safety, and the environment should absolutely be remediated, and all responsible parties should be held accountable for doing that, and as soon as possible. I will note, I live closer to an active Superfund site, North Penn Area 12, which is off of Pot Shop Road. I think the address that's noted is Trooper Road. And that is the reason that my neighborhood, as I understand it, has public water, because of the TCE and other hazardous chemicals that were leaking under it. My understanding is it is being managed, but there's a 5-year review coming up in 2025. And in my opinion, the township should take an active role in overseeing the continued cleanup of that site, as well as the other Department of Defense and industrial sites on that hill, the Nike missile site, and the Army Reserve site. I totally encourage the township to be concerned about environmental issues. As relates to the City View property, I've walked around it, I've checked it out, and certainly, again, I think it should be remediated to a standard that's protective of health and the environment. I don't think it takes an environmental engineer to clean up unsightly issues, litter. There are paint cans and solvent cans on the side. There are bricks. There's debris and even electronics in the ditch along Park Avenue, all very much worthy of being cleaned up. And I think there are tools at your disposal to do so. I encourage you to work with the Department of Environmental Protection, Montgomery County, and our neighboring townships, Lower Providence, certainly if we're concerned about the downstream effects of that. And I also would encourage the township to consider, as I think has been discussed at least a couple times in the past, the creation of an environmental advisory council, a group of volunteer environmental background, environmental professionals of goodwill from the community who might be able to look into some of these issues in further detail. And lastly, I ask that as you get reports from any developers or other property owners, and as the township looks into these issues in more detail, that they also consider posting that information publicly. I'm a little bit concerned by some of the previous meetings I've viewed, that the discourse and decision-making is based on speculation, hearsay, or innuendo, and I would love it to be based on the facts. And I think we can get the environmental data to figure out what's going on and what's required to clean it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. When that topic comes up on the agenda, we'll give a little bit more information regarding that we can provide tonight based on a meeting we had since our last meeting on that particular topic. So I'll hold that until we have that as an agenda item, but appreciate your comments. Does anybody else have any public comment for the board this evening? Seeing none, we'll get started then with official action items. First item up is the consent agenda. Does anybody wish to remove any items from the consent agenda tonight?
Nope.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve consent agenda, July 17 work session, July 17 business meeting minutes, treasurer report, other monthly reports, bill payment of July 24, $356,746.43.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Moving down to the motion section, first item up is going to be a motion to approve Pannoni as the Township Environmental Engineer and authorize the interim Township Manager to execute the Environmental Consulting Services Agreement. Before we get into sort of the mechanics of that, I do want to share. So, John, I'm going to ask you if I stray from factual from our meeting last month, I'm going to ask you to step in and sort of correct. But following our meeting last month, we had a meeting with Pannoni to review the City View site specifically. We had asked them to review the removal of some tanks and review certain information in this way. There were some questions that came up in there. I'm going to start with what I'll call both the good and the bad news right off the top. I mean, you made reference to contamination. There is contamination there, so they have done part of what the process is the property owner can make a decision, and I believe it's under Act 2, John, is that what it's called? So under Act 2, where they can self-remediate, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me if that's not perfect language, but ultimately, they can make the decision to work with the DEP and say, we recognize there's potential issues here, and we're going to clean them up. And they've done um, a phase 1 and a phase 2 environmental survey there. They have recognized at least 7 locations on the site that have soil contamination. I don't have the specifics on all of that. We're sort of in a unique spot. They're working, DEP is the governing entity there. We're sort of the intermediary, and we've been trying to be a little bit of a squeaky wheel to say we're not comfortable with what we're seeing and handling there. So there is recognition. They have not remediated. There is no, so one of the things that we certainly want to make an effort to be communicating to people is there's no shovel going in the ground. There's nothing being built. There's nothing, like, all of that has to be resolved before they can even start a process of land development. They haven't even gotten to the point of sort of land development yet. Last night there was a zoning meeting on a waiver to the site. So there's a lot of moving parts, but ultimately what we were able to uncover through some of that, and part of the reason I certainly think there's a need for an environmental engineer consultant and sort of in play here, is just sort of trying to get ahead of some of those things. Even though we don't really have governing authority to stop certain things, they have to work with DEP, and we're sort of ancillary to that. But ultimately, yes, there is, we did ask them, the interim township manager worked with them to do some cleanup over there. They're limited in terms of what their requirement is, but certainly they did remove a lot of surface, Jay, that's correct, right? But not necessarily perfectly, but they did make a concerted effort to clean up some of the loose pieces. I don't know how recently you had walked that site, but that was within the last 2 weeks. Does that sound about right, Jay? Okay. But the long and the short of it is that, there is clear recognition, there is some soil contamination there. Lou knows some of the history far better than I do in terms of sort of, as he's said, where the bodies are buried. I don't mean that in, it's probably not the great terminology there, but ultimately, Bert's not here tonight, but another resident who goes back 50 years and remembers some of the junkyard things that took place over there. So there is recognition there, but what we're trying to do is make sure that we're trying to get in front of it where we can. We're trying to make sure we're holding them accountable to what needs to be remediated, and certainly working with DEP to say either we're not happy with what we're seeing, or how do we get more involved as best we can. So that's sort of a summary, John. I don't know if I said that sort of right, mostly right. If you want to sort of, if that's my recollection from our meeting.
I think you did very well.
Okay, fair enough. So guys, we've had this on the last couple of months. I'm happy to make the motion. I certainly want to get your input on it. But I'd like us to appoint Panoni as an environmental engineer to us. Even if we feel like we need to continue to do more research going forward on other directions, I feel like having that piece in place would be certainly helpful, so that we can sort of start to make sure we're prepared for some of the things that are going on. But I want to hear input from both of you. We've talked a little bit about this, I know, in past meetings, and certainly we can discuss it.
Am I up?
You're the vice chairman.
I'm just waiting, checking
You're
it.
the next big shot in line.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just requesting, and I think I made an error, but I did request last meeting that legal counsel provided additional contractors. I did not follow up. Wendy did correct me, and I apologize for that. But being a hotspot and we're having a management change, I believe that we need a choice, and I would request 3, and at least we did interview one, and he's been, I guess, somewhat hired to do some preliminary evaluation.
He did a project for us, and the idea here would be an open-ended services agreement. You're not committing to do any specific work, just that they're a resource that's available. I mean, I guess
I'm just not ready to commit to a contract with anybody right now until I have a choice. And I believe, being a hotspot with this, I believe that, and again, with management change, I would rather table this for 30 days until the next meeting.
What's the tabling a month going to do? I mean, I'm just.
Well, I had asked for additional contractors presented. Wendy did issue a statement, and I apologize, I did not follow up with that email to pursue it to like, please present additional contractors. So again, that's my concern. I just need more than one contractor. Management provided one. He may or may not have a past working relationship, and that's okay.
Well, we had actually had two. We had,
We did have two.
you had submitted one and
Steve actually did submit one. I just-
what, in either case, I mean, there were two and we just, but either, so I think we should appoint somebody tonight. If you think it's important to interview more people, I'm not opposed to having additional conversation. My concern is pushing anything, getting somebody in place. We're not incurring costs to do that. We have somebody in place, then if ultimately we want to talk to a couple more people who offer some unique skill set beyond that, then I'm not opposed to, again, I don't want to deny the ability to talk to somebody else, but what my concern is just, last night, there were 130 people were here for a zoning meeting on a waiver because they didn't quite understand what the meeting was about. It wasn't really, and I want to make sure that there's a resource that if something happens next week, that we can tap into that resource, even if we're continuing to sort of do some additional due diligence, if you will.
Since you're aware of the zoning meeting, was anything given, approved, or anything? Nothing?
No, it was continued. Ultimately, they're making, so they're making so let me back up a second. So 2 years ago, they approved
Zoning.
approved a waiver. I think that tied to sidewalks, or we're not putting sidewalks in, if I remember correctly. And again, I'm going a little bit from memory here, Jay.
Correct, Mr. Chairman. The two waivers that they granted was a 2-year waiver, which was subsequent to a 1-year waiver, to file the plan to allow them to put sidewalks on Germantown Pike and Valley Forge Road, on the
Park Avenue.
Park Avenue. Without the waiver, because of the way the ordinance is written in the township, there would be no sidewalks. So it's actually. by
Waiver to
granting
do
this-
something good, technically.
Correct.
Or at least that's the argument.
I'm just real technical point. It's actually not a waiver. It
The deferral.
would be
Uh,
a
Variance.
A variance, right?
Variance.
Hearing board grants variances and special exceptions, so. we're
Gotcha.
Talking about.
So they had granted a variance 2 years ago. There was a time limit. They have not yet submitted. So what happened last night was a revisiting of that variance, which is,
The application, maybe?
And the second one was to allow parking to be further from the roadway as opposed to right up to the street.
gotcha. But ultimately, they did not make a determination on it. They continued that to at least next month or possibly October for that particular item. But it was something that had been previously done. The time limit ran out, and then you have to go back and, so they didn't agree on anything last night other than,
Rick, just can I interject?
Sure.
2 seconds. So 2 years ago, there was a zoning hearing board meeting, and they were granted 3 variances. 2 of them were for development in the floodplain, and that's associated with the culvert extension on Park Avenue, and then the basin outfall. The other one is to allow parking closer to the road, and they were granted those variances with the condition that they needed to have approval within a certain amount of time, which was a year. That year passed, they were granted an extension to this past June, and that's where we're set now.
okay. Thank you, John. But ultimately, nothing happened last night.
What you're saying is they made application, it expired, so they had to reapply. Does that dumb it down, John? Okay, so that makes sense. So they just reapplied for what they had.
Correct.
So that's.
They didn't resolve that. At the end of the day, they didn't resolve it.
Clarifying, but I get,
we-
again, I still
you know-
requesting additional 2 or 3 other.
What I'm saying is I'd like to approve someone tonight, and then if we want to continue to see if we can find other resources, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't know. Steve, what are you?
Mr. Betts, you said you need a month, and you'd be ready in a month? I mean, and once again, I'm concerned about the whole project over to begin with, and all the birdies are always whispering in my ear in Worcester, and I had lunch with a birdie the other day, and who was very involved with the project, and I won't say anymore, I'll leave it at that, but there's some concerns raised regarding the property. So if we would table it for a month, you'd be ready to vote next month
I appreciate you.
on approving a environmental person?
I would
You'll do your
appreciate that,
research and
guys.
come back. This is a project going to go on for a while, and I think if we start with a weak foundation, if someone's not happy with the situation, with the parties involved, I don't want to start with a shaky foundation. I want to be a solid foundation to begin with all parties involved going in the same direction. And I feel that, Lou, that, that you're not, you have questions on it. So therefore, I'll hold off on voting on it this evening and be ready to have it on the agenda next month. And I think in that time, we'll have once again, I praise Shay for stepping in. I don't know how he does step into a township and facilitate the three people working with each other. It's not an easy process, but I think in the next month, the burden of problems will be on somebody else's shoulder, and give them a little time to look into the persons we're looking to bring in. Maybe have some input. I don't know, but for that reason, I'll just not vote on the item tonight.
Okay. So just so that we can facilitate, what is it that you need to have happen, and where can we?
So okay, if I could just ask.
You could jump in. Yeah, go right ahead.
Now, is staff being asked to provide additional recommendations for firms that you wish to interview?
Yes.
So you want to conduct interviews of at least how many other firms before you would be ready to make
Would two more be
two
If there's
more?
even two more that would fit the,
Sure.
hundreds of environmental engineers?
Get some names and some recommendations.
okay?
We happen to have a call next week with you have special environmental counsel with respect to the Nike missile base there, and so.
That's the law firm. We're not,
I know that, but I can certainly ask the
Gotcha.
firm
Manco
for a
Gold.
recommendation
Yeah.
for an engineer.
Okay.
So that's a question that I'm sure we can get some other names and find out.
That's fine. I just want to make sure that we meet the calendar of next month's meeting to whatever it is that we need to do in that
As far
regard.
as interviewing those firms, do you wish that to be all three board members engaged in that?
No, I once again, we never agree on everything, I guess, and I think that you try to move ahead with the project. I think Mr. Betts has expressed concern in the past, and I'd like him to be on board with Pinoni, or he's not against Pinoni, but what other companies are out there? The residents of the township are going to be not stuck with, but they have to deal with the results of our decision. And this is a pretty big environmental issue within the township, and I think we have to make sure we're going around the right path, that we're all three for right now are on the same page, and I don't want anybody to be, not a weak link, but disgruntled over what we're trying to do and raise concerns about it. So if Mr. Betts is willing to move forward next month, I'm willing to give it a month and come up with a decision, making a decision next month in the way we're going to go. It's not an easy process. There's a lot of hurdles they have to jump over there, but to their credit, we did call them, and they did clean the place up rather quickly with our staff being there supervising what was happening. And I think they can say, hey, listen, you've been around a long time, and people don't usually react that quickly. And I think in this case, they did step up, cleaned it up, and worked with our township on that, which was important. But we have a lot to do going forward.
So I'll get some more names, and John and I will talk, and we'll put our heads together and try to get names for two
Okay.
more well-known environmental engineering firms that.
I guess the question, probably for Mr. Betts, I know he had said something before, but the real issue is, I think he mentioned that everything's subcontracted out. You take a car to Mr. Betts' gas station, he works in the roof to the tires. right or wrong, I'm not sure if he's that good with transmission, but the environmental company, no one does, this company sublets it out, a lot of the work. They find outside vendors to bring them in and pull the information together, and I think that's what Mr. Betts is saying, hey, that's the best person pulling the information, uh, Pinoni versus other companies out there. Maybe it's a true environmental company that strictly works for environmental work. I know it's, I dealt with the Army base, and it's a tangled mess we weave that the lawyer for the Armory, his name was,
Mango Gold.
Gordon?
Mango Gold, are you talking?
Manco Gold. He said that Mr. Manco said that when he got out of the University of Pennsylvania Law School 43 years ago, that was the first case he worked on. 43 years later, he's still working on it. So environmental issues are tough issues, and I think it's important that we don't run down this path, we walk. So to Mr. Betts's opposition or concerns, I'm willing to heed to him to try to resolve the problem that we all can agree on.
Okay, fair enough. I would just say, Wendy and John, if you need any additional direction quickly to us so we can make sure we can meet our timelines. Okay, so next up, we're actually going to have a series of 3 motions, but we're going to start with what I think is some good news. He hasn't left yet, so this is a good sign. He's seeing us with all our warts, nights like tonight, Steve. So we are fortunate enough that we've hired a permanent township manager, Dan Domeno, and I'm probably mispronouncing his last name. I apologize that, Dan. I should know better, DeLillo. That gets mispronounced often enough. But we're going to have a series of 3 motions where we're going to be approving his start dates scheduled for September 3rd, but we're going to do it as 3 unique motions, as I often like to do. I want to just take a minute to welcome him. I want to share, I jotted down a couple things that I can share, but I'll mostly leave it to him as time goes on. He's a guest here tonight. We're not putting him to work, but hopefully he's thinking through what he's hearing tonight and formulating his first 90 days and items that will matter. But as you know, earlier this year, we had a transition to township manager, and we've been sort of actively looking for a full-time permanent replacement. We went through a search process, got a series of candidates. We interviewed several and worked it down, and Dan was who we decided to move forward with. Dan has had a progressive, I think we describe it as a progressive career. He's worked both in the private sector and in the public sector in municipal government. So he's got a background that's really, we think is well suited for us. I'm certainly very happy. I don't like change. I think one of the things I talked about is saying I've just started a second term and I want to have a township manager that's still here when I finish up my second term, plain and simple. I mean, that we want stability in that role. I think some of Bob's questions certainly, when we see transition and we see change, I think it certainly shines light on areas that we want to drill into deeper and make sure that are locked down the way that we would like, ultimately. But he's got a good background, both in finance. He was in the banking industry in the private sector, and then he spent a lot of time in municipal government, both in various, he's worked in large municipalities. He's currently in a smaller municipality where he's very hands-on, which is something that we feel like our community needs. I think Jay would concur after the last several months being hands-on is really one of the key traits that we need in a township manager and sort of the dynamic that we have here. He's married, has 3 kids, so we think that says good things about him as well in terms of that. But ultimately, one of the things that I enjoyed meeting him. I enjoyed getting to know him through the sort of the process. I also had the opportunity to read some of the references, like when we did the background check process. And one of the things that sort of stuck with me is references at all levels, if you will. We try to do a pretty exhaustive background check, and so it was people that had worked for him, people he had worked for, people that were peers, and it was across, various jobs in various places, and there was a lot of common threads where they talked about his work ethic and how they really enjoyed how he treated people, and they really enjoyed working with him or for him, and there were sort of consistent comments that you heard across different bosses or different co-workers and different things, which, it's always, you can get one or two references to say anything. When you start doing it across a large enough sample, I start to feel much better when I see those consistent things, and those were areas that I felt really good about. So, Dan, welcome. Even though it's unofficial until September 3rd, I'm thrilled that you had an opportunity. Again, you get to see us with all our warts and in terms of meeting, when we agree, when we disagree. We try to agree and disagree cordially amongst each other, and certainly we're thrilled to have you here. But the process, because it's a personnel matter, there's going to be motions, there'll be seconds. We will open it up to public comment. We can't necessarily provide answers on everything regarding personnel. I just want to say that up front, but ultimately we're going to start. There are several roles that we had given to the interim township manager. I think Christian still has some as well, but we're going to assign those to Dan first. So the first motion, Lou, that we're going to be looking for, unless either one of you want to add anything more to the mix. Perfect.
You just sound like you're doing the introduction to the dating game of the 70s with all that introduction, but that's kind of fun. I like
It's kind of what I do.
Anyway,
Kind of my thing.
I'll make a motion to appoint Dan Tamino, as township manager, township secretary, zoning officer, code enforcement officer, right to know officer, effective September 3 of 24.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Next up, we're going to request a motion to approve Resolution 2024-11, which is establishing compensation for the township manager effective September 3rd, 2024. Can you make that motion for us, Lou?
You're jumping to D here, but okay. Make a motion to approve Resolution 2024-11, establishing compensation for township manager effective September 3 of 24.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Now we're up to D, Lou. You can take that one. Are you on C or D?
Yeah, you said D. Now I think we're jumping to C, but anyway, motion to authorize chairman of the board of supervisors to execute the employment agreement between Worcester Township and Dan Domino, effective September 3 of 24. Is that the one we're on?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's C in my book, but that's okay.
Oh, you know what? C and D are. I don't have my glasses on. I'm sure that's on me.
We're in there.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Welcome aboard, Dan. All right, next up, we've got a motion to authorize the interim township manager and his capacity as plan administrator to sign the 2025 minimum municipal obligation forms for the non-uniformed employees money purchase pension plan and the retirement plan for employees at Worcester Township. Jay, a little more information, please, or Christian, whoever's got it.
This is a normal thing that's done once a year. The township's contribution to both the defined benefit and the defined contribution plan. Money has to be committed to those plans on behalf of the township.
Any questions on?
This is a formality, am I correct in that?
Correct.
Every year.
It's every year.
You read it and made the motion, can I just second that?
I don't know.
You wanna repeat
Solicitor, can we,
You want me to repeat?
I read it. Can we say that I made the motion and then he seconds it, or we got to start from the beginning again?
You did.
Well, I read it out loud. I mean, I guess is.
All right, then I'll make a motion to authorize the interim township manager in his capacity of plan administrator sign the 2025 minimum municipal obligation forms for the non-uniformed employees money purchase pension plan and the retirement plan for employees of Worcester Township. There's a lot of that.
It's a mouthful. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any public comment regarding the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, next up we have the topic of the fee schedule and the permit fees. I'm going to say one quick comment. I don't have any issue if we pause on this particular item, based on the feedback we heard tonight and some of the other. I mean, what we're really trying to do, as I understand it as much as anything, is just sort of align a fee schedule to what we think makes sense relative to the expenses. I think certainly both residents raised a couple of, I think, valid questions and concerns on that we certainly can take a little bit more time to sort of digest on that. And again, that's maybe something we can, at the end of the day, we're trying to align the fee to the individual, not to the entire community. But, certainly, again, I think the residents made fair points, and I don't have any concern if we want to take a little more time to digest on that.
And once again, Rick, to your comment that, we're just trying to be fiscally responsible. And I think the system manager came in, he did a research and said, hey, your fees are here, your fees are there. And we're just trying to be good stewards of the township money and be fiscally responsible to all the residents. So thank you for your comments.
I agree, concur.
Okay, so we're going to table that particular item. We'll spend a little more time researching that particular item. Next up, we have other business. I just have one item I want to bring up under other business, guys, and that's so there was a couple of months ago, as you recall, the fire department had asked about a training facility on Nike Park, and we had instructed staff to check the. There's a deed. The long and the short of it is there's a deed restriction. There was an email that went out to all of us earlier this week, but I don't know if everybody saw it or not. But there's so Nike Park has a deed restriction on it that does not allow us to put any structure on it for that. So they can't build on that particular site unless it's theoretical, and I'm going to ask Wendy to make a comment on it, that we could potentially petition the source to see if that could be changed. But it does have a deed restriction on that, which I wanted to bring up to discuss. So
Deeded to the township by the United States government, and it's specifically in the deed states it can only be used for recreation purposes, and I don't have the wording memorized, but basically for recreation purposes for use by the public. And I think the deed goes back many years, and actually a prior solicitor looked at the deed because I think some sort of perhaps similar question came up, and the answer back, it wasn't with regard to the fire company, but I guess something else, and the answer came back that it wasn't permitted under the current deed. The only thing you could potentially do, and I think it probably would be cumbersome, is potentially to request the U.S. government to make an exception to the deed restriction for this specific use. So I have no idea how long that would take.
So I guess my thought was just, so, well, the short answer is no. I mean, I certainly think we were all amenable if there's somewhere in the township where they could put a facility somewhere else. I don't know, but.
I agree, we should at least
That's it.
entertain
Yeah,
helping the firehouse. How about that?
that was my thought
Great.
in terms of that. So you got any thoughts there?
Josh wasn't picked, so there goes our chance to get that done.
Executive privilege, is that what you're looking for?
I don't know. We want to have a.
Yeah, it's an important safety factor that we have to be in touch with, be understanding of what they're trying to do there, that certainly the water pressure, they've said for a long time in Worcester that we don't have a lot of water when they go out to fight fires, and certainly they know firsthand that they're out there doing the work, and when they go to put the fire out and the pressure is not coming out. So it's really an important safety issue that we have to be on top of and trying to expedite it with the township somewhere.
Right. So ultimately, Jay, I don't know if we shared with the fire department yet or not, but ultimately, I think we need to share with them that
Sure, I'd be glad
Unfortunately,
to.
it's-
Just, and the deed is in your package. The deed goes back to 1975,
Yeah.
and I believe that the entity that gave it to the township is no longer an entity of the U.S. government, but it's probably been merged into about 3 other branches, so trying to track down exactly who to get it from would be very cumbersome.
So Jay, you're a very astute person. I'll turn this to you. What would happen if you went and drilled a well there anyway without getting permission?
The well is different. This
I mean,
would be-
to get water, a water source, to get a water source, to tap in to get water out of there.
This, well, the fire company wants to put their training tower there. That's what this is for. So I guess if someone let the federal government know, they could probably come in and take the land back if they wanted to.
You think they do that? No, you're leaving anyway, so you can say it. I mean,
Mr. Quigley, I would have no idea. I can tell you.
That's a good
what,
answer, Jay.
I won't tell them.
you're right.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Well, Jay, I'm not sure if sometimes I happen to miss a meeting, but if I don't see you publicly, I really appreciate you stepping in, helping the township out in this period of uneasiness. And it's not easy. We sit here and do it, but you have to come in and try to plug the right information, try to work with the supervisors and the staff and our board and our professionals. And on behalf of the township, I don't think we could have picked a better person for this job to come in and work with us. So I thank you for that, getting over that hump that it's a challenge for all of us to sit here and try to find the right person. And it just seemed it was a couple of months, but it's going on a half a year. Time flies when you're having fun. And so I thank you for the working with us and becoming a friend, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
You stole my thank you. That's good. I appreciate him stepping in. I had a couple things to just say, but yes, we do. Certainly, I appreciate it. It's Worcester, not Worcester.
It's hard to switch a
So,
66-year-old.
so
You've been out of Boston longer than Rick.
he's been out of Boston longer than I have, over 30 years. It still sounds like he came there a week ago. You know, he's carried all the Bostonian with him. But certainly, I've enjoyed it as well. It's always very entertaining to hear stories of other municipalities and other unique things there. So, does anybody else have any other business they wish to bring before the board?
I have one idea that I just want to pass to the board to see if they think, and one member of land planning is here. And we were entertaining a band shell idea. So one thought that came to mind is where to put it, and it's gonna, and again, dealing with John, Hebner Park. And this is just an idea that we do have the 9 acres next to the Cross Griffith here. So what would you think if the band shell were put up here? Because a couple of reasons. One, you got water sewer. Two, it's next to commercial. The noise isn't going to bother anybody. You got a bunch of trees to the other side. It's not really going to affect the neighbors for the 2-3 times a summer, 4 or 5. And we have parking. And maybe if we relocated the horse provisions to across the street. But again, the band shell's been an idea, but it just came, somebody else brought it to my idea. It wasn't my idea. But I'd like to pursue land planning as far as put that on their agenda, as far as the band shell maybe up here, it might be an idea. Pursuing, again, the other events that, the meeting was canceled for whatever reason, but I'd like to pursue the.
You'd like their input. You'd like their input on
Correct.
location.
Illuminated signs, the fence game, and, I mean.
Excuse me.
fence height.
I believe their meeting is tomorrow night, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken, but I don't know what the agenda specifically is. I wouldn't put Bob on the spot. I don't know what's on the docket, but I think it's tomorrow night,
And there you go. Okay.
I believe. But either way, if it is not, certainly I don't have any issues with them having that conversation again. So, okay, fair enough. Okay. We've finished with public comment. Does anybody have any final public comment they wish to make at this time? Bob?
I think he's really Jim Moloch disguised.
He's got a mask on?
Bobby and Worcester. So just try to quickly summarize. I know that you've asked for this to be of a higher priority, but the environmental issue came up in June. There were two proposals. I don't want to think that I'm the conciliatory type of person, but I said neither of you can, or all three of you can't agree. There's two, come up with a third person. I made that recommendation. I thought that something would move forward, move to July. Lou made a recommendation or asked for that to happen. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but if you guys could just try to implore everybody that this is a higher priority. Don't wait 3 weeks to get additional names, because then in September, you won't have had an opportunity to look at them. I think it's important that you have somebody on board, to your point, Rick, but if you're not going to agree on it, you got to find a satisfactory alternative, and it needs to take a very high priority. So I won't say anything else because I have other thoughts on that. Number two, on Nike Park, I hope that you're joking, Steve, in terms of doing something without permission. I mean, we need to set an example. If we know that something's not right, we don't have permission, and it's tongue in cheek. I believe that you don't think that's the case, but it would be irresponsible for this township to move forward with something that they know isn't approved, or because they don't have explicit approval. It's just a comment. I don't need a response.
To the environmental issue, I think Mr. Betts' concern is that we're hiring a company that is really going to sublet the work out to somebody else. And is there somebody else could do that? That's an ongoing question there.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. I think it's important. I think you guys think it's important, but unless you make it the highest of high priorities, we'll be here a month from now saying, well, we just got names. We haven't had an opportunity. I think you want to be in a position to make a motion and have had serious thought and agreement so that we can move forward.
Yeah, that's why I question Mr. Betts has some concerns, and I'd like for the board to work together rather than having votes or someone's upset, and life's not fair sometimes. So that's why I question Mr. Betts at the next meeting, we're willing to move forward. And I think the environmental issue it's an important issue.
I think you're all in agreement. My only point is to make it a highest of high priorities, because it wouldn't be fair if, I'm not pointing the finger at Lou to say he's the stick in the mud, but if you come back with names 3 weeks from now and he's not able to or participate, or the three of you aren't able to interview them, that's just not fair. So
There will be a vote. I guarantee you there will be a vote taken at the next meeting. There will be an environmental someone.
Next week, you need to have names so that you have an opportunity to interview them or look at their CVs or do whatever you need to do so that you're moving forward properly. I wasn't going to raise it on terms of band shell. I mean, Lou has a different idea. You know where I'm coming from. I don't know what our agenda is, but the Planning Commission, and I'm certainly not going to speak for them. I am a member of the commission, but the task that was put before us was to evaluate uses, all potential uses for all potential sites that the township currently owns. So to expect us, I mean, you could ask us to do that. Part of my process was I want to go see these properties. I want to understand what they are, look at what the potential uses of them are. You're talking about 9 particular properties. We can't do that in one particular meeting. And I have expressed my frustration that it was suggested that we didn't have anything to do last month. And so we lost a valuable month in terms of doing that. It's water over the dam. We can't do anything about that. I think we need to move forward, but I don't know that the Planning Commission, I mean, the other 4 members may just decide they'll give you a recommendation. I won't, because I want to look at the bigger picture, see what's best for each site or potential uses. I mean, if we make a decision that something changes a month after that, so be it. But to dismiss or isolate and make a single decision, I think is premature and is not serving the township well. And lastly, on the budget issue. I didn't summarize this before because I could tell that I was pushing the limit in terms of what I was saying, but it was suggested before when the saldo issue came up that this was just a way of capturing cost. It was at cost, it was not a profit center. What I started to say earlier was our budget for 2024 and every other year has been fully funded. At the end of the day, we come back with $750,000 or $1 million surplus every year. It's consistent. So if that's the case, and every staff member, and that's supposedly the issue, the time that the staff are putting in, if that is fully funded 100% and we still have a surplus to that extent, if we charge $1 more than what we are, that's not a net zero cost. That's an additional thing. If you're looking to try to take advantage of the residents even more so, your proposed increases in fees are not going to limit development or construction or anything else. And the only people who are paying that fee are the residents. If it's a developer, he's passing the cost on. If it's a contractor, he's passing the cost on. So the residents, the people who are here or ought to be here, they're the ones paying that additional fee. And whether it's being subsidized as part of the overall budget, if you want to, as I said, reconfigure the budget and allocate properly the funds that are there, I'm happy to do that as long as that there's not a net increase, because any increase is in fact an additional tax. Thank you.
Bob, just to follow up to your comments, the bigger elephant in the room that we're not discussing is the new school they're talking about, the high school, hundreds of millions of dollars. And, it's something that there's been information going back before the township and them being the school district. Hey, we're looking at this. What do you think? There's been no formal discussion, but that's a big nut for the taxpayers in Worcester. A lot of people, hey, the high school's pretty good. My kids went through it. The building's pretty good. What do you really need a new high school for at $200-300 million and a lot of change in Worcester? There's a lot of things, I guess, that we discuss, a lot of things that are happening within the township we don't discuss that we know it's coming, but there's a lot of fiscal responsibility or fiscal decisions coming to township's way in the next couple of years that will be very interesting, to say the least. No.
If we didn't have a significant surplus every year, that's a different discussion to have. Where are those costs going? I mean, ultimately look at the tasks that you're performing or the tasks that the township typically performs. Are any of those tasks not being performed because people are spending an excess amount of time on permit or code issues or anything else? Do we need additional staff? But when the budget's presented, our staffing is sufficient for everything we want to do. We ultimately have a surplus. There's nothing that's not being accomplished. No one's come forward with any additional requests for things that we want to do. It needs to be presented properly so that people can make a valid analysis of where those costs are going. And then I mean, a $750,000 to a $1 million surplus is a significant amount of money year after year. And so,
And to your point, we're very fortunate, but once Harrisburg and the state police decide, and then there's rumors, hey, we're about maxed out, we can't do it, we can't cover this, we can't cover that, and when things start happening in the township and we need a police force, then we have no money. And it's just inevitable. It's something the township, I've been involved 20 years, sitting up here, the discussions going back and forth and listening to state police whispering, hey, we're running out of troopers, we can't give you the service. The money that Worcester has hoarded will disappear very, very quickly. And we're the first township coming west of the city that's not occupied by a police force.
understood. I mean, Jim Malik used to always suggest that you charge less and give that money back. That's not my, at least, policy position, and I'm not advocating for that. I'm just asking you to think, when you say this is not an additional cost, it is. If it goes above and beyond the budget, then people are paying, one way or another, we're going to pay for it.
Agreed.
And if you're somehow suggesting that we want to continue, again, look for savings, not for additional revenues. What can you do faster, cheaper, better? And if you've reached that limit, that's fine. But when you still have that surplus, don't say, oh, well, we need to maintain that surplus. That's what I have a hard time. And when the state police and the Commonwealth changed that rule, then you're coming before us. We understand that. It's no different than the sewer fund. We need to have a responsible approach to it. Hundreds of percent of change just because that's what other people charge doesn't make sense to me. That's like saying, for you, do you charge, are you basing your ice cream prices based on what your costs are or what your competitors are charging?
Yep.
Okay, if it's based on what your competitors are charging, then you're in a for-profit business, and that's different than what the township is in. If you're basing it on what your costs are, and you need to raise those prices just so that you're supposed to be, the township is supposed to be in a break-even point. The fact that we have a surplus, fantastic. Nobody, I'm not advocating for anything else. I'm just saying, asking for more seems to be a hard pill for me to swallow.
Yeah, but you come back to quality issues as well. When you start comparing where one township versus another township versus services, what they have versus open spaces, not open, it's pretty hard to put everybody in one nut bowl and make it even.
I'll be the first person that we shouldn't be basing anything that we do in Worcester on anything else of any surrounding townships. It's interesting information, but it's not relevant.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anybody else wish to make any final comment? Christine?
Christine Steer, Worcester. Steve, what I just heard you say is it sounded as though one of the motivations for the fee change was just stick it to the school district because they're planning on building a new school in Worcester. I hope that that's not what's going on.
No.
I'm talking about the school, what the township is faced with.
Sure.
Issues that we deal with here as a board.
Sure.
Nothing to do with the fees and Robert's saying. It's just,
Okay.
I guess the township's well aware of what's happening.
Sure.
There's no discussion publicly regarding the school, but we know they're coming in and would like to build a whole new high school.
Right.
And from talking to residents already, your kids are out of school, you're saying, you really need a high school? And I guess it comes in the question, how many people in Worcester really have kids in the school? And that's how they vote. They vote by their tax dollars.
Right.
That's it. How it's going to impede them. They've already put your kids through Worcester for 12 years. They're out. They get a good education there. Hey, my kids got through there and they have a good job. Why do we have to put a $300 million addition, a new school here? It's really, really needed. That's the question.
Right.
That I'm saying the township's going to face, but it has nothing to do with it.
Okay. It sounded as though, as though we're raising the fees because we know the school district wants to build a new school, and so we want to
No, what we were saying, what he was in essence saying is we were having a spirited conversation, a fair conversation about a fee structure and valid points being raised and questions being raised. And he was sort of commenting that conversation isn't happening at the school district ultimately. And
I just wanted to get clarification.
at least I think that, so yeah.
What happens, the piece from our assistant manager coming in, a new guy on the block coming in and seeing the expenses the township is forecasting, what's happening, and doing a survey, and Worcester's different than everybody else, we understand that. And because Tementon charges X amount of dollars, does Worcester have to do that? But he has just.
There was a logic to it. I mean, the logic was done, but,
Different townships and presented it.
Sure. Oh, no, I mean, certainly there was a lot, you can tell there was a lot of work that went into it. So I definitely none of my comments are meant to, take away from the work.
nope. we appreciate the comments, we do, and we say that, we don't say it to be snarky, we want to hear the comments, because otherwise we don't have the right input from our standpoint.
I just wanted that clarification because it just didn't sound good. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? How are you, Bill?
I just wanted to share something,
Okay,
have a little conversation. I had the pleasure this past Sunday night to attend a gathering of, it was called the Farmers Gathering Dinner at the 4-H Center in Skippack. It was put on by the Montgomery County Planning Commission Farmland Preservation Unit. And they had a program of different agencies, such as all the other departments of the Planning Commission. The United States Department of Agriculture was there, Pennsylvania State Department of Agriculture was there, Penn State Extension Service was there, 4-H Service, and a number of other private agencies that support those tasks was at the dinner and gave a presentation. Some of the speakers were County Commissioner Tom DeBello, State Representative Mary Jo Daly, Montgomery County Farm Bureau President John Karoff, and various leaders of the Farmland Preservation Unit with the Planning Commission. Some of the topics were how to recruit more farmers into the preservation program in Montgomery County, but it was mostly skewed towards western Montgomery County. There was a department of the Planning Commission that was doing a survey for the county 2040 comprehensive plan, and which is planned usage and build out for the rest of the county for that date. They also talked about in the farming realm, they talked about some of the initiatives they have with the farmers fighting the spotted lanternfly and the India hemp invasive species in the county. And they also shared they're hosting a seminar in Lansdale next month about, this is pertinent to last night, about how zoning planning, the making of the sausage of zoning planning and how it goes about. And that's available to the public if you go onto the Planning Commission website. I went as a person who has a property in the preservation system, and as the president of the Farmers Union. And so it was good that I went, because I was the only resident of Worcester. There were 14 townships represented at the gathering, again, skewed to the western part of the county. But there was a lot of good information, and part of the other side of this open space conversation here is people with the acreage need to know what is available to them. And this was a good place to learn those kind of things. So I thought I'd share that.
thank you, Bill, appreciate that.
Just to follow up to his comments, I've been sitting on the farm board for how long? And it's getting harder, and everyone's for farmland preservation, which you did, and I commend you for that. But it's getting, I want to say, almost next to impossible to encourage people to do that. So if anyone's listening to the meeting, we do have a farmland board trying to preserve open space within the county, and the families aren't coming forward as fast as they used to. So it's a challenge.
And they talked about the demographics of who the farmers are in the county, and younger generation not necessarily wanting to take over those operations, and as you said, just the other opportunities they have. So anyway, thought I'd share.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for going to the meeting.
Anybody else? Seeing none, then motion to adjourn. Thank you all for coming.